going, guys? Winner Kills here, and welcome to a brand new deck profile. This time around for good old Atlantean Mermail. Still continuing the Atlantean Mermails here all the way in 2021, back from when I started in 2015. First deck profile of the year as well, going to Mermails here. Recently, on my stream and just in general, I wanted to sort of bring back decks that I haven't played in a long time. Mermail being one of those decks, and upon wanting to get back into the deck and sort of revise it and get it ready for play for this particular format, I went back and obviously, looked at some of my older profiles that I uploaded, and I remember that I had done some cool stuff with the Deep Sea engine in a previous deck profile from I think 6 to 8 months back. And, I remember it being kind of promising, and I wanted to experiment with it more, but I just never got around to it. And that's basically what I wanted to go ahead and sort of do with this build, pick up where I left off with that Deep Sea build. I've been testing it a lot more, and I do really, really like it. I think it does offer a nice sort of change of pace for this deck, because for me personally, the overall play style of Mermails in general really hasn't changed too much over the past year or so. Calamities is still a thing. Just as much now as it was a year ago for Mermail. It is just done a little bit differently. You can hand loop, everything like that, but this is something for me personally that feels fresh. I really do like it. It still can hand loop, but in a bit of a different way, and it just has so many more cool plays and unique combo lines, I should say, that make it more enticing for me to play as a whole, and it could potentially have some competitive value to it as well. So I hope you guys are looking forward to my take on Mermails for January of 2021. And if you do, please be sure to leave a like and also consider subscribing if you haven't already, so we can get to 20,000 subscribers. Now, before we get to the profile, here's a quick way you can support the channel. If you're looking for any TCG accessories, check out Imperium Duelist at the link below. They offer a wide variety of products such as sleeves, deck boxes, dice, binders, apparel, and playmats, including my very own playmat, Blazing Permafrost, which is on sale now. You can get all of these amazing products for 10% off using my discount code WinnerKills10off at checkout, and support the channel in the process. And of course, if you're shopping on either TCG Player or Drawface.com, don't forget to use the affiliate links I have to their sites down in the description below, because if you shop and check out using those links, a small bit of the revenue from your purchase will go right back into the channel, and it helps out greatly. With all that out of the way, let's get into this profile. Alright, so let's go ahead and start with the standard deck profile that we normally start with. We'll begin with the monsters. And first and foremost, we have 3 copies of Mermail Abyss Teus, 1 copy of Mermail Abyss Megalo, 1 copy of Abyss Gunt, and that does round it out for our Mermails. Then next we have 3 Deep Sea Diva, 3 Atlantean Dragoons. From there we have 3 Neptabyss, the Atlantean Prince, of course, 2 copies of Atlantean Heavy Infantry, 3 copies of the Deep Sea Minstrel. Obviously has more utility in this version than just ripping cards out of the hand. 3 copies of Swap Frog, with it 1 Ronin Totem, 1 Lapis Dragon, 1 Fishborg Launcher. Then we have 3 copies of DD Crow for this particular format, and 2 copies of Gameciel, the Sea Turtle Kaiju. That rounds out the monsters. Now we'll go through the spells. So to start for the spells, we have 3 copies of Megalanica, the Deep Sea City, 2 copies of Deep Sea Aria, 1 Pot of Avarice, 1 for 1, 1 Moray of Greed, 1 Terraforming, and 1 Abyss Scale of the Mizuchi. That's it for the spells, and also that is it for the main deck. Now we'll go ahead and do the extra deck. And to start for the extra deck, for our Synchros, we have 1 Satellite Warrior, 1 Ravenous Crocodragon Archethus, 1 Adamancipator Risen Dragite, 1 Deep Sea Prima Donna, 1 Formula Synchron. That is it for our Synchros. For our Xyz, we have 1 Mermail Abyss Gaios, 1 Abyss Dweller, 1 Bahamut Shark, 1 Totally Awesome, and that rounds out the Xyz monsters. And last but not least, we have the Link monsters, which consist of not 1 but 2 copies of Marincess Coral Anemone, 1 Mermail Abyss Alacia, 1 Mistar Boy, 1 Christian Hauka Fibrax, and 1 Bujinki Ahashima. That rounds out the extra deck. Now we're going to go through the deck profile one more time, a lot slower, but in a lot more detail. Alright, so the first monster we're going to discuss here is everybody's favorite Mermail monster, the one, the only Mermail Abyss Teus. I think single-handedly, to this day, one of the best Mermail monsters in this deck's arsenal. Just simply because it takes 1 water monster to summon it, so it's a very, very low cost compared to other Mermail monsters. in the archetype. And when it is special summoned, you can add a level 4 or lower Mermail monster from your deck to your hand. So there's a wide range of cards that this card could search. Things like Pike, Gund, Abyss Mander, Abyss Neray, Abyss Dine, Abyss Lind, you name it, this card can search it if it's a Mermail and if it's level 4 or lower, mainly just using it in this particular build to provide a good discard outlet, and also be able to search out Abyss Gund, which is a monster reborn upon being discarded. So, I mean, there's really not much else to say. This card you could consider a starter card 100%, because even if you're discarding a water that won't get its effect off of its, summoning effect, or for its cost rather, really doesn't make too big of a difference, because this card will still be netting you another card to help facilitate your engine. Maybe you had to discard a Megalo to summon it. You could grab Gund, and maybe you have a Minstrel in hand. You could pitch the Minstrel and the Gund to revive the Megalo, take a look at their hand, and also possibly set up a rank 7 or Link to play in the process. So just a very, very good card around. Would recommend this card at 3 1000% in any build of Mermail regardless. So moving on, we have the big boy himself, Mermail Abyss Megalo. Seems like as the years go on, the number of this card in the main deck seems to dwindle and dwindle. Here we are down to just 1 copy. I think in the previous builds I did last year, I was also running only 1 copy of Megalo, but I really do like it. I can't honestly say that I've missed the other. If you feel, so inclined to play the second one, I say go ahead and do it. I'm not going to fault anybody for wanting to play a second copy of Megalo, because in some instances, having a second copy in the grind game is very, very welcomed. And I cannot, disagree with that. But we do have plenty of recursion within this deck via Totally Awesome, Miss Starboy, Mermail Abyss Lacy, and Pot of Avarice, just to name a few. So you do have plenty of ways to recycle good old Megalo here, and oftentimes just resolving one can really put you in a good position to the point where you really don't need another one, and drawing multiple Megalos will often contribute to bad hands, which we do not want. And the last Mermail here is the Mermail Abyss Gund. Basically, if this card is discarded to the graveyard, you can special summon 1 Mermail monster from your grave except itself. So basically just monster born. If it's discarded, doesn't matter if you discard it off of something like Twin Twister, or if you discard it off of Megalo or Teus, you're going to be able to get to revive Mermail in grave so long as you have a legal target. So very, very solid card all around. And I like playing it at 1 because this is a card we really only primarily want to search off of Teus. The only other card I would consider adding in here, but the reason I'm not playing it is mainly just because of space, but that's Mermail Abyss Pike, which is basically a level 4 Mermail that can be searched off of Teus and provide a normal summon, which will provide us another discard outlet to potentially be able to search this, or Minstrel, or Marksman if you're playing it. But I just could not find the room in this particular build. I mean, I could play it, but then again, I'd have to cut hand traps, which I don't feel too good about doing. So yeah, you got to make some compromises, but I think the 1 Gund is good enough for now for that graveyard recursion. So moving on to sort of like the Atlantean package / water good stuff, we have 3 copies of Deep Sea Diva, fully out here flexing with the 3 different language super rares. But yeah, Deep Sea Diva, it's crazy to think that this card is actually at 3. While it's not game-breaking at 3, otherwise it clearly wouldn't be at 3, it is so helpful for this deck, giving you more copies of Prince to be able to work with, essentially bumping that number up to 7, if you want to count 1 for 1 as the 7th copy. But this card is incredible, and with Minstrel in the game, you can always rip those hand traps out of the opponent's hand to make sure this card resolves a good portion of the time, which is so beneficial. Not to mention, it's a tuner, so it gives us access to the good old Halka Fibrax if we need it. And it's also a tuner just, which is good just in general for synchro plays, which we do quite a bit of in this deck. And just consistency is what this card adds. Fantastic starter, 100%. Then we have 3 Atlantean Dragoons, the icy Dragoons here. I think I've been playing this card at 3 ever since it was able to be played at 3. I think since like a May 2018 ban list is when Dragoons came back to 3, and have obviously been playing it at 3 ever since. Basically, all level 3 or lower Sea Serpent type monsters you control can attack your opponent directly. When this card is sent to the graveyard to activate a water monster's effect, add 1 Sea Serpent monster from your deck to your hand except itself, and it is not a hard once per turn. You can use this card's effect as many times as you're able to send it to the grave to activate a water monster's effect, which is huge, and it allows you to search out a huge portion of your deck, searching Minstrel, searching Diva, searching Prince, Infantry, Megalo, you name it, searching Lapis Dragon. It can search a wide range of cards, and literally has to be one of the, if not the best discard in the entire deck. And obviously we play cards like Teus and Megalo, right, and Minstrel. Those cards are pretty much in some cases only as good as the card you're discarding to summon them or just resolve their effect, and Dragoon is that card that you want to be discarding, ideally 10 times out of 10. So now we'll move on here to the other prime normal summon of the deck. Yes, we do potentially have 6 normal summons in this deck, 6 hard normal summons. But this card could also be considered a superior extender in some instances because it does have a very, very good graveyard effect. Whereas if it is sent to the graveyard to activate the effect of a water monster, you can special summon an Atlantean in your graveyard back to your field, and it is a mandatory effect, much like the other Atlanteans in the archetype. And it does have a really nice on-field effect where it says you can send 1 Atlantean monster from your deck to the graveyard as cost to add an Atlantean monster from your deck to your hand except itself, and you also cannot send itself. So you can just send Dragoons, add Dragoons, and Megalo, or send Dragoons, add Dragoons, and Minstrel, whatever you want to do. Huge facilitator of the Atlantean engine, which helps in turn fuel the Mermail engine. So if you didn't know about that synergy between Mermails and Atlanteans, this is basically the bridge between the two, because before this card was released back in like 2015 or early 2016, you know, you had to hard draw both those cards together, but now you have this good middle ground card, and the card that can be tutored off of Prince and things like that, and can be searched off of Dragoons, and that sort of gets you the Atlantean engine going, and also helps to fuel the Mermail engine, because again, the Mermails do need you know, cards to discard, and you know, the Mermail cards don't do anything if they're not discarding anything that's good, and that's where the Atlantean engine of course helps out. Next up, we have 2 copies of the Atlantean Heavy Infantry. This card I think I've played at 1, I think I've played it at 3, I don't think I've ever played it at 0. This card is fantastic. It does have removal, but it also does have a nice bit of extension. It says during your main phase, you can normal summon 1 level 4 or lower Sea Serpent type monster in addition to your normal summon set. You can only gain this effect once per turn. And when this card is sent to the graveyard to activate a water monster's effect, target 1 face-up card your opponent controls, destroy that target. So that is a mandatory effect. The additional normal summon effect is great and does come up sometimes, especially if you have a Diva in hand. It just helps to get more bodies on field to have for link plays or synchro plays, whatever it may be. Heavy Infantry will help set up those plays and make them happen a bit easier. But the in-engine searchable spot removal is very, very, very awesome. You know, having removal in a deck is one thing, but having removal that is just a part of your engine is always advantageous and always welcome. I did think greatly about playing Marksman this particular format because there is quite a few control decks in contention right now. But, you know, Marksman's biggest flaw is that, you know, chainable traps, you know, do kind of hurt. And, like, things like Punishment, things like Sanguine and Conquistador, right? Those cards can dodge around the Marksmans by simply being chained. Marksman also strictly has to destroy set cards, so if they per se have a continuous trap, like Call of the Haunted for example, at least is the way that I understand it, if you pitch Marksman to target that set call by, or set Call of the Haunted, and they flip it face up, it is face up, and Marksman is no longer able to destroy it. But I still think Heavy Infantry, to this day, is really, really good. There's always going to be face up cards in the game at some point, and this card is a good card to have to remove them. Next up here, we have the Deep Sea cards, the Yomi Deep Sea cards. I was thinking about playing the Deep Sea Artisan, but I really couldn't get my hands on one to try in recent days. So Haven't added it in yet. I might add it in the future. I just don't think it's entirely necessary at this point for this particular build, so I'm not running it currently. So yeah, Deep Sea Minstrel is a card that I admittedly did not like when it first came out, but I have since then changed my mind on the card ever since I really stopped using it as just a card that looks at the opponent's hand, because I think for the most part, you'd ask any Mermail player what this card does, and they'd say it rips a card, but if you ask them what the other effect is, some people, I don't want to say all, but some people would probably not know what the other effect is, and I think it is pretty good, of course, when paired with the Deep Sea Field spell, which we'll get to later. But it basically says, obviously you can discard this card on a water monster, look at your opponent's hand, and banish one card from their hand face up until the end phase. If this card is special summoned, you can send the top 3 cards of your deck to the graveyard, then target one level 4 or lower water monster in your graveyard except itself, place it on top or bottom of the deck. So that second effect there does actually come up in this particular build. We can special summon it via that of the Marincess Coral Anemone. It can summon any water monster in a graveyard with 1500 or less attack, and obviously Minstrel fits the bill. It is a tuner too, so not only can you potentially stack the deck with the field spell to mill a Dragoons to get a search, also recycle a Dragoons in the process, but also set up a Halqifibrax off of just Anemone and this card because it is a tuner and a non-tuner all ready to be linked off into a nice Halqifibrax play. So I find that this card just gets so much more value in this particular build. Does it need to always get that value? No, but is it nice to have it? Of course. Now we're going to go ahead and pull out this engine here. This is an engine much like the Undyne engine that we used to play back in the day that I've always been back and forth on, but I really do like it. It's just because I feel like there's still a lack of water good stuff to put into this deck, and I really didn't want to put in more spells and things like that, although I'm very, very tempted and very, very much so want to main Triple Cosmic Cycle in this format. I just really couldn't fit it into the main deck. Would highly recommend fitting it into the side deck somewhere though, and we'll talk about the side deck when we get there. But Swap Frog and the whole Swap and Ronin engine was really the only engine that I could think of that really made the most sense to put in here. They can just summon themselves from the hand, discarding another water, which is advantageous sometimes, of course, and it can help set up a nice interruption in the form of Totally Awesome. And it is very, very recurable. And not to mention, we can recur this card from the deck off of Deep Sea Prima Donna, and we can also tutor it back, Swap Frog in particular, from the grave off of Anemone as well to continue to make more plays. So I find that this engine gets a lot more value too with the Deep Sea engine in the deck, because we can essentially tutor any, decent water monster from our deck off of that Synchro, and this is a pretty good engine to have, especially if you already have a Swap or a Ronin in grave at the point of using the Synchro, which obviously we'll talk about when we get to the extra deck. Now I'll talk about these two together. We have Lapis Dragon and Fishborg Launcher. Obviously, Lapis Dragon is an incredible searchable tuner extender to get from the deck. Basically says if this card is added from your deck to your hand, you can reveal it and special summon it. If this card is added from your graveyard to your hand by a card effect, you can reveal this card, special summon it, but banish it when it leaves the field. So basically, we can just, send Dragoons to the grave and search this card and summon it to the field to be able to Synchro with, or to be able to link off into any of our Water Link 2s, or importantly, Halqifibrax. And then playing the one Fishborg Launcher, yes, this is also a card that I wish I could find the space to possibly play a second at some point, although I am perfectly content with just playing the one copy at the moment. This is our primary target to summon off of Halqifibrax. Not only is it great because it's a level 1 tuner and it pairs nicely with our level 7 monsters in our deck to help us Synchro into Adamancipator Risen Dragite, but it's also a recurable tuner that can just summon itself back from the grave if all water monsters we control in the grave, if all monsters that we have in the grave are water monsters. And it can only be used to summon water monsters in a form of Synchro summons, but that doesn't really matter. Pretty much all the Synchros in the deck that we're going to be using to make with this card are waters. So fantastic level 1 tuner. And of course, it's also a 1-for-1 target too. And even if you open this card and have to discard it off of Megalo, Teus, or Minstrel, it's not so bad because again, it can just become an extender once the graveyard conditions are right. Now, before we move on, I do want to mention the Water Charmer stuff. I've been seeing some cool things going around with that in Union Carrier. I understood for a second, someone informed me on stream that there was a play you could potentially do by sending off Prince with the Water Charmer to summon itself from the deck by sending the one that Union Carrier had equipped, and you could summon Dragoons. and make Bahamut, but that play doesn't work because the Prince is being sent for cost and not part of an effect, so Prince wouldn't be able to summon the Dragoon, so that play didn't work, so kind of lost interest in it, but it is interesting to say the least, and it's something I probably won't play at the moment because, of course, it does add 2 Garnets to the main deck, which I'm really not a fan of in a deck that is already kind of inconsistent as Mermail can be, so steering clear for it from it for now, but would definitely consider it possibly in the future. So now we're going to move into everybody's favorite part of deck building is the hand trap lineup, which unfortunately I could not fit more in here. I'd like to at least throw triple Ash in here. I know there's probably plenty of people out here that would easily cut the field spell that I'm playing for Ash, and feel free to do so, but I try to at least find a good balance. DD Crow is a really good card. Ideally, this card would be replaced with Skullmeister, because I think Skullmeister is just so much better. I do think Bell is great, but I just find personally in the decks that I've played against in my local meta that Skullmeister just does more and covers more things, but DD Crow and Bell, of course, are great options as well. I'm not going to sit here and say that they aren't, but DD Crow is nice because there are so many graveyard effects going on right now in this particular format. You got Eldritch, Drytron, just to name a few, so having good graveyard removal this format is very, very advantageous. And next up, we have 2 Gamma Seal, the Sea Turtle Kaiju, giving us some board-breaking power if we do have to go second. Obviously, Nibiru is kind of falling out of favor this format with the lack of combo in the meta, but we do find a lot of decks ending on big, powerful boss monsters, typically one of them, things like Dragoons, or Red Eyes Dark Dragoon, Calamities, etc., and we can just use the Kaijus and stuff to clear those big monsters. Whatever they may be, it doesn't matter. Nice, easy spot removal in the form of tributing. This card is just really good, and it's been always decent in Mermail pretty much since this card's inception, way back when. Yeah, that's it for the monsters. I think that's pretty much all I wanted to cover. I wanted to cover the Water Charmer stuff, and I think that is about it. But now we're going to go ahead and talk about our spell lineup here, and we're not playing any traps, obviously. I mean, not obviously. There are some cool traps you could play in here, potentially like Dynamiscus, the Water Charmer trap card. You could also potentially play in permanence, but I just don't think in permanence that great this format, and that seems to be the general opinion of the community currently. But we have 3 copies of Megalannica, the Deep Sea City. This is the card that makes this build function. Basically said this card name is always treated as Umi, but when this card is activated, you can place 1 water monster from your deck on top of your deck. And then it says once per turn, you can target 1 water monster control, increase its level by 1 or 2 until the end of this turn. Even if this card leaves the field, it says once per turn during your main phase. If you special summon a water synchro monster, you can look at your opponent's hand, and if you do, banish 1 card from it face up until the end phase. So yeah, it's got a lot of effects, 3 to be exact, and they're soft ones per turn. So if you have multiple copies of this card, you can use those effects obviously multiple times. And I really, really like this card for pretty much all of its effects, to be honest. The stacking effect is great because it pairs wonderfully with the Deep Sea Minstrel effect that I talked about earlier, how it can stack a water monster to the top of your deck. Well, you'll use this card to stack it. Minstrel will mill the top 3. They are being sent to activate the effect of a water monster, so things like Dragoons, Neptibus, and Infantry alike will all get their effects off of Minstrel's effect, and we can pretty much guarantee one of the cards off of this. And then it says you can target a water monster you control, increase its level by 1 or 2, so the level manipulation does come in clutch sometimes when you're working with smaller monsters like Diva, Infantry, and Minstrel, of course. And its last effect is great too, and it pairs perfectly with the Deep Sea Prima Donna. Says if you synchro summon a water monster, or special summon a water synchro monster, you can look at your opponent's hand and banish 1 card from it face up until the end phase. So we're going to be banishing cards from opponent's hand off of the Minstrel, and of course off of the Deep Sea City. And I'll pull out that synchro monster right now just so I can show, like, you know, the synergy between these two. So basically this card says your opponent cannot target a synchro monster that use this card as material with monster effects. And this says you can only use each of the following effects of Deep Sea Prima Donna once per turn. So ideally with, you know, typical setups that I've done for this Deep Sea combo, you're gonna usually start it by discarding Minstrel. So you already have some hand advantage, or hand knowledge I should say, maybe they do have a lot of good cards to hit. Maybe they don't. Maybe any of the cards that you're hitting don't matter. That if you're taking them out of their hand until the end phase, like maybe the only thing you want to take out is like an Ecclesia. They don't have any hand traps, right? Which is already a bonus for you. But the Ecclesia, like, it doesn't matter if the Ecclesia stays in their hand during your turn or, you know, or it doesn't. But the nice thing that happens here, and I guess that will lead into what I'm about to say. It says, you can target one of your opponent's banished cards, add it to your hand, or special summon one level 4 or lower water monster from your deck, and if you do, add that target to their hand. So this, I find, that particular effect, it might seem bad. Yeah, you're hitting a card out of their hand, either off this when you Synchro summon it, or you're just using Minstrel, right? And that'll usually kind of set this card up immediately because they already have a card banished, even if you don't have the field spell out. So you can get that nice extension that this card offers, which is great. Summon Prince or Swap Frog from deck, or Water Barrier Statue, as some people I'm sure have tried or are still running actually at this point. But that makes it like better when, you know, Minstrel doesn't get any good value. Obviously the hand knowledge is great, but let's say you're not hitting like a Nibiru or something, or an Ash, right? Something that you wouldn't want to give them back. But in some cases there's going to be turns where you're just giving them back an Ecclesia or whatever, and it doesn't really matter. It didn't matter if it was going to be in their hand during their turn or if it wasn't, right? But then it has another effect where it says if this card is sent to the graveyard, you can target one banished card, shuffle it into the deck. That right there, my friends, of course, is where the spice lies. So, of course, you can hit a pivotal hand trap out of their hand, maybe off of Minstrel. And then, of course, you can use Deep Sea City to hit another card. Maybe it's a really good starter or extender they have. Maybe it's Cursed Land. Maybe it's Alistair, right? Whatever it may be, you can link this off, and ideally enough, it's a tuner, so you can go right into Halka Fibrax with it. Chain Link block, or chain block the Halki. You know, go Halki 1, Prima Donna 2. Put that card back into the deck, and of course summon off of your Hulk. So there is so much fantastic synergy here, and I absolutely love it. So that's why I play this card. I think it's great. The only downside is there's really no other way to search it out outside of terraforming. Yes, you could go so far as to play things like Metaverse or the set rotation, but I just can't find room for it. Now we'll move on to my favorite spell. One of my favorite spells in the main deck is, of course, 2 copies of Deep Sea Aria. Unfortunately, it can't really be classified as a starter card because of the setup that this card does take. You have to have a water monster in your grave already, of course. Having cards like Megalo, Teus, and Minstrel help kind of solve those problems by getting waters to the grave easily. But again, you know, it is a little bit of setup required. It's not just play it and search a level 4 or lower Sea Serpent, right? That would be pretty busted, I'm not going to lie. So yeah, banish a water monster from your graveyard, add a level 4 or lower Sea Serpent monster from your deck to your hand. So you could view this as a pseudo starter, you know, extender card. In some instances, you know, you could just summon Teus, ditch any blank water, go ahead and grab Diva, right, and get on with your plays, which can be, in some cases, the difference between winning and losing. Of course, they have a hand trap. Of course, it's another story. But this card is great all around. I've been back and forth between 2 and 3, but I think 2, for consistency's sake, is good enough for now. And we have Pot of Avarice, and we also have Moray of Greed. I was playing originally 2 Moray and a Pot of Avarice, but I think I wasn't playing the Terraforming, but I really do want to see the field spell. So yeah, I did decide to go with 1 copy of each, because of course that will allow me to play both of these cards. When I was playing Moray of Greed without Avarice, there were several times where I really wished I had Pot of Avarice, because there are a few engine cards in this deck that we would really like to be able to recycle. Of course, Dragoons is one of them. Recycling Deep Sea Divas and Infantries, recycling key cards like Anemone or Prima Donna back to the extra deck is really crucial for this deck in the grind game. So I did, of course, want to at least be able to include Pot of Avarice and still have the nice draw power and consistency that Moray of Greed adds to the deck. Ideally, I'd like to play 2 Moray and a Avarice, but I think this is a good middle ground for now. We have 1 copy of the Almighty 1-for-1, simply just acting as a nice starter card to get us direct access to Prince without using our normal summon. Then we have 1 Terraforming, obviously just to search out that Megalanica, which is just nice, of course, to be able to play 4 copies. And then, last but not least, Abyssgale and Mizuchi. This card arguably could be cut. You know, some of the better decks right now are kind of trap heavy, but of course, decks, of course, will still play spells, and being able to force negate at least one of them is very good. But this card, you know, if I needed a little bit more space, maybe if I wanted to play another Moray of Greed, or if I wanted to play a 3rd Gamma Seal, whatever it may be, or if I wanted to play Metaverse or something, right? You know, I could easily see myself dropping this card at some point. But, you know, being able to search this card is good not only for the spell negation, but sometimes it's as nice as just discard fodder, whether it be for Alacia or Ravenous, Crocosaur, or Kethis. So, speaking of Ravenous, we're going to go ahead and go into the extra deck right now. And we'll start with the Synchros. All right, so for our Synchros here, the first one we have is Formula Synchron. We can technically make this card without Halqifibrax. It would just require both Fishborg Launcher and Neptibus, but we're mainly just summoning this off of Halqifibrax. And if you do time it correctly, because remember, this card can miss timing if summoned at the improper time, because it says when this card is Synchro summoned. So it needs to be the last thing in the chain to happen. So like if you have 3 chains, this needs to be chain link 1, can't be 3 or 2, or else it will miss time. It has to be when this card is Synchro summoned. So the best times to do it are on the resolution of a card effect, or if your opponent is trying to change phases. You know, if they're trying to leave main phase, you can do it then, because that doesn't start a chain. Which is really, really nice. And Formula Synchron will be able to net you a draw and allow you to step into oftentimes a bigger Synchro, which will provide more disruption that we'll talk about in a moment. Next up, we have Deep Sea Prima Donna. We kind of already talked about this card, but I mean, it's such a fantastic card for this deck. It is nice that it's a level 7. Obviously, it'd be a little bit better if it was a level 8, but, you know, beggars can't be choosers, right? It's also a tuner monster, which is absolutely amazing, because you can link this into Halqifibrax, or you can, you know, synchro with it in Prince or Infantry to go into either Dragite or the Ravenous Crocosaur, and anything synchroed with this card, remember, cannot be targeted by monster effects. And its stats too are really important. Not only does it have a huge defense, that's 2,700, but it does have 1,500 attack points, which means it can be brought back from the grave via Coral Anemone, which will allow us to, you know, basically reuse both of its effects, saying you can target when your opponent's banished cards, add to your hand, or special summon a level 4 or lower water from your deck, and you add that target to their hand. So a lot of the better decks right now do tend to do a lot of banishing, not to mention we are playing DD Crow, so in theory we will have, you know, quite a few banished cards that we hit with Crow to put back to their hand. Yes, we're giving them those cards back, right? But it is, of course, allowing us to extend, which in some instances could be the difference between winning and losing, you know, being able to get access to that pivotal push. And of course, we can reuse its graveyard, or its other effect when it hits the grave, to target any banished card and shuffle in the deck, whether we're recycling our own cards that were banished off of things maybe like Deep Sea Aria or Fishborg Launcher, or things off of Swap Frog, right? Or we can just put things that our opponent has back into their deck that we don't want, you know, to allow it to go back to their hand. So yeah, Deep Sea Prima Donna, fantastic card. Adamancipator Risen Dragite, I think, is staple within this deck now, so long as Halqifibrax is in the game, because Halqifibrax really does allow us to make this card pretty easy. I mean, granted, you could still, even without Gone, still play Launcher to get easy access to this card, but, you know, it's nice to be able to get access to instant Spell Trap Negation, and Dragite is fantastic. For that, Ravenous Crocodragon, Arkethis. You know, this card can draw you oftentimes in this deck anywhere between 1 and 3 cards on summon, and that is great for allowing you to continue to extend, and also, you know, providing a massive discard outlet during the opponent's turn to be able to interrupt them at any given point. Just because, you know, discarding Infantry off this card allows it to get so much more value, because Infantry will be able to pop a card because it was discarded off this, and then of course this will be able to pop a card in of itself, so it can destroy multiple cards in the process. And with the stats that it has, it can be brought back from the grave off of Anemone. Hence why I'm playing 2 copies, actually. And then Satellite Warrior, because oftentimes you'll be ending on Dragite with Halqifibrax, and Halqifibrax can obviously tutor out the Formula, and Formula with this can synchro into the Satellite Warrior, and this will be able to pop 2, sometimes 3 cards upon summon. So that is it for all the synchros. We'll go into the links now, where we first have the Bujinki Ahashima. One of the 3, I guess, actually. Yeah, one of the 3 and only 3 non-water monsters in the extra deck. And I bring that up because we do have some cards that do lock us into water in the extra deck, Anemone mainly. But this card is really nice. It says, if this card is link summon, you can special summon 2 monsters with the same level, one from your hand and one from your grave, but negate their effects. And immediately after this effect resolves, Xyz summon 1 Xyz monster using those 2 monsters only. And then it says, if an Xyz monster this card points to activates this effect by detaching a material or materials except in the damage step, you can target 1 spell trap your opponent controls and destroy it. So in some cases, you could get the back removal off of it. I've never had that effect resolve. But, you know, it just gets you easy access to Gaios when you don't have, you know, a full way to get like 2 level 7s on board. You know, oftentimes you can use Diva and Infantry or Prince and Launcher to get access to this card. And not to mention, of course, it can help you make Bahamut Shark and Abyss Dweller, which is great. Dweller being fantastic too, because you can, you know, Dweller them on their turn, make sure it's in a zone that the Ahashima points to, because you'll be able to pop a back row, which is pretty advantageous too in this particular format. Next up, we have Crystron Halcophyrax, a fantastic extender. It's a water monster, which is great. So if we use Anemone, we can of course still go into this card and be able to tutor out Diva, Minstrel, or Fishborg Launcher directly from the deck to be able to continue to extend with. Mistar Boy, just for boosting everything up and going for a quick game. Or, you know, it's just a nice card to kind of sit on for a little while. If they clear it, you get to add back a water from the grave, which is nice. Sort of same concept with Alacia, but Alacia I think is a little bit nicer because it can provide a bit of a form of disruption during the opponent's turn. If you're discarding things like Infantry, you'll get a pop and of course a search in the process. And it does allow you to, you know, search a Mermail as we mentioned, and if it dies, you know, you get a ton of advantage off of this, so it'll oftentimes make your opponent have to deal with it in alternate ways, which isn't really a problem for a deck like Eldlik, but you know, with that graveyard effect of Alacia resolves, it is pretty brutal. Just because it says, if this card in its owner's possession is destroyed by an opponent's attack or card effect, you can send a water monster from your deck to the graveyard, then target a water monster in your graveyard, special summon and defense. So you can send a Dragoons or send an Infantry, revive, you know, literally any water monster, so long as it's not a link, but you can revive Prima Donna, Crocosaur, Dragite, Megaloteus, whatever it may be, and you know, pop a card or search if you're sending Dragoons. Very, very useful card. To Anemone, I find this to be one of the best extenders for the extra deck. It's just so easily accessible. All it takes is 2 waters. Yes, it does lock you into waters once you use it, but it basically allows you to revive any water monster with 1500 or less attack in your graveyard, and especially summon it to a zone this card points to. So yeah, it's just a great card all around. And they're, like we talked about earlier, there's so many good cards in this deck that we can revive that have that under equal to or less than 1500 attack stat. Even some fantastic cards in the extra deck like Crocosaur and Prima Donna. And I think that is it for the links. We have now in the Xyz, we have our 2 rank 4s, Bahamut Shark and Dweller. Pretty much staples in this deck since as long as I can remember. Dweller is fantastic, obviously for turning off graveyards. And then of course we have the Bahamut Shark for being able to tutor out Toad and also potentially give us a chance to search off of Dragoons, because these cards, when they detach Dragoons, you'll be able to search because they are being sent to the graveyard to activate a water monster's effects. We do have 1 Gaios. It's a fantastic floodgate card to sit on sometimes, and some decks outright can't get over this, which is great. You know, while it has materials, level 5 or higher monsters can't attack. And you can detach a material during either player's turn to negate the effects of all face-up monsters your opponent currently controls until the end of this turn that have less attack than this card, but this card has 28. Oftentimes will have 33 or more because of Mistar Boy, Alacia, and Mizuchi. And then last but not least, totally awesome, the prime target to be able to summon off of our Bahamut Shark, and it's just a great card all around. We can also hard make it with the Swap Frog engine as well. I would play 2, but you know, the second one and all the testing I did, it didn't really come up, and yeah, I just don't have the extra deck space either. So that's it for the extra deck. Now we're going to go ahead and talk about the side deck real quick and wrap up this video. So obviously there is really no perfect side deck. Everybody's going to have their own preferences based on what they consistently play against, either at locals or just, you know, on the ladder. The side deck I have admittedly been having a little issues putting together. But right now, I think it's triple Lancia, triple Ghost Bell, the triple Droll and Lockbird, double Lightning Storm, triple Cosmic Cyclone, and of course, red Reboot. I think those cards right now are all pretty good at addressing some of the top meta contenders. Obviously, back row removal is huge this current format. Like I said earlier, I really wish I could main Triple Cosmic Cyclone. It's the card that I find myself siding in a large majority of the time. You have Drone Lock being very good against a deck like Drytron, which is huge since Drytron is such a fantastic deck. Lancia also being good against Drytron and still pretty good against Dinosaurs, even though that deck doesn't see, of course, too much play. It's still, you know, a lot of side deck hate there. You could, of course, also side Cycle Reader and things like that. Ghost Spell also being pretty good against the Drytron deck, being good against the Dogmatica strategy, and also being good against the Eldritch strategy. And then obviously just the plethora of back row hate. So cards I typically go to side out, though, would be Abyssgale and Mizuchi. You could easily side out Terraforming. You could also easily side out Pot of Desires, of course, if it's favorable. The Gamma Seals could go out as well if you know 100% if you're going to be made to go first. And I should mention at this point now that this is a go first variant, if it hasn't already been made clear. And then just sort of going through here. Of course, if DD Crow isn't good, you know, you could easily side that out. But just thumbing through here really quick, yeah, those are pretty much the cards that I would consider siding out. I really would leave the Moray of Greed in just because the consistency within the main deck, having that there is going to be good. Like I said, you could also drop the Crow. So side decking space within the main deck is pretty tight, but these are cards that you could drop easily. Again, the other 2 copies of Crow could go out if it is not favorable in that particular matchup. You know, maybe if you're playing against Drytron and you don't want to play DD Crow, you know, you could easily drop the Crows for the Bells or Skullmeister, which I did say I do think I would rather play Skullmeister in here than Bell and then Crow, but I just don't have Skullmeister at the moment. But these are the cards that I would typically side out in general, and that I have been kind of consistently siding out. But yeah, that is going to do it for this Mermail deck profile, the first deck profile of 2020. I hope you guys enjoyed, and if you're still watching at this point, I greatly appreciate it. My analytics say that about 6% of people that watch my videos usually make it to the end, so if you're still watching at this point, which I doubt anybody is, but, you know, I really appreciate it, and I really do hope you guys enjoyed the intro at the beginning, put a lot of time and effort into that, and I hope you guys liked it. Many more to come within the, obviously, coming year. If you want, check out the Mermails at Local video I posted. I'm doing testing sessions videos, test hands, perhaps some combos, and also perhaps a guide video on Mermail at some point this month, if all things go well. So yeah, thank you guys for watching. Thank you so much for the continued support. I really appreciate it. Consider subscribing, like the video, drop a comment, share the video with a friend, all that good stuff. And as always, Winter Kill signing out. I'll see you guys in the next one. And of course, as always, a huge shout out goes to our Divine Level channel members here on YouTube, and they are Academic Thick, Zors, and Cadillacs 84, keeping the channel going strong. Again, thank you guys so much for your continued and very generous support of the channel.